So now I have the ironic pleasure of introducing a gentleman that needs no introduction, which is ironic. But Dr. Katz is the founding director of Yale's Yale-Griffin Prevention Research Center. He's the president of ACLM, and is fierce in his efforts there. He's editor-in-chief of Childhood Obesity, founder and president of the nonprofit organization Turn the Tide Foundation. He's also medical director of the Integrative Medical Center there at Griffin Hospital. He's published not too many, I guess, tons. And to me personally, Dr. Katz he exemplifies a grounded but an innovative and transformative view and passion for lifestyle medicine. So with that, let's introduce Dr. David Katz.
Good morning, folks. Good morning. I did eventually get dinner last night, so I forgive those of you who stood in the way. I have a more favorable disposition toward you this morning, having eaten and slept. I imagine some of you were here at the conference last year. You saw the three-round boxing match that John McDougall and I had. And unfortunately, John's not here this morning, but if he were, I would have called him up and given him a hug. And that's where that ended. John and I have been corresponding routinely throughout the year. I'm actually going to be speaking at a conference that he sponsors, and we're very good friends. And it's relevant. It's relevant. Now, some of you, of course, didn't see the boxing match. You'll have to go to the videotape or ask the person sitting next to you. But even within the small enclave that is lifestyle medicine, we can be fractious. We can have discord. We can think my approach is better than your approach. And as we heard from the panel yesterday evening, we have a long way to go to persuade our colleagues in medicine at large to think about the importance of lifestyle, to persuade patients and our culture. And we won't get there from here if we bog down in squabbling amongst ourselves. So one of the things that John and I were discussing over the course of the months after the conference is, what do we agree on? How important is that? How do we advance that mission? There is the danger, I think, in any enterprise of failing to see past parts to the whole and to addressing the mission related to advancing the whole. We are prone to that. We are certainly not the first. It was 6 men of Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall." The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, "Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me 'tis mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear." The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up and spake, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a snake." The fourth reached out an eager hand, and felt about the knee. "What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain," quoth he. "'Tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree." The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, "In the blindest man can tell what this resembles most, deny the fact who can. This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan." The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a rope." And so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. So oft in theologic wars the disputants, I ween, tread on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prayed about the elephant not one of them has seen. I fear, my friends, we are prone to much the same tendency in public health, preventive medicine, medicine at large, epidemiology, and even here in lifestyle medicine. And the case I want to make this morning is there is a truly luminous prize, tantalizingly within reach, if we can just reassemble the parts and see past the elephant in the room. Let's get beyond the bits and examine the sum of parts. We'll start with what lifestyle medicine can do, familiar terrain, I suspect, for most of you. We'll talk about opportunity lost, the failure to translate knowledge into power. We'll consider the dark wood of modern epidemiology, the dark clouds over our head, but then look for that silver lining. Consider the problem that has forestalled the progress of our field for decades, if not longer. See if we can get some leverage with the proper use of metaphors, and then shift our attention to the delivery of medicine and look for the big spoon. See if we can offer the world a glimmer of hope, and then get out of the woods by seeing the forest through the trees. Some of this, of course, is merely a refresher. Some of you have heard me address these topics before, although I'll move off in a different direction shortly. But let's begin with what lifestyle medicine can do. It's what brings us together today, not marriage for Princess Bride fans. Any Princess Bride fans? Marriage, that blessed arrangement, that dream within it. No. Back to our regularly scheduled program. What lifestyle medicine can do is what brings us together today. And it's incredible. And we've known about it for a long time. In fact, it's surprising, really, that we are as young as we are, and that so much still lies ahead of us. And we can go back to Hippocrates. Lifestyle was medicine then. But in the modern era, I think the story begins well with the publication by McGinnis and Figi in 1993 of Actual Causes of Death. Because prior to that publication, really the only way to chronicle the leading causes of premature death in our society was a list of diseases, the things on death certificates: heart disease, cancer, stroke, respiratory disease, and so forth. And McGinnis and Figi pointed out what really is the clarion call of lifestyle medicine. Diseases are not causes. Diseases are effects. What are the effects of? Well, frankly, bad lifestyle choices for the most part. What McGinnis and Figi did was put together a list of 10 factors that were responsible for virtually all of the premature deaths in our culture every year. And in the epidemiologic dark wood of 1990, the first 3 things on that list were tobacco, dietary pattern, and physical activity. And what remains stunning to this day is that 80% of the action was just those first things. So there are other important things on the list: sexual behavior, exposure to toxic substances, motor vehicle crashes, and so forth. The important thing about the whole list is that overwhelmingly, each of us as individuals and everyone we touch has the potential capacity to modify these factors. But maybe even more stunning is that 80% of the action was just the first 3 things. What we do every day with our feet, our forks, and our fingers. 80% of the premature deaths. And because these premature deaths were the result of chronic diseases, we weren't talking about the root causes of just years lost from life. We were talking about the root causes of life lost from years before years were lost from life. This is what we learned about the critical importance of lifestyle medicine back in 1993. We got a refresher 10 years later when Ali Mokdad and others at the CDC reanalyzed this issue, reaching substantially the same conclusion. All that had really changed over the span of that decade is that the gap between tobacco as the #1 cause of premature death and the combination of bad use of feet and forks as #2 had narrowed. It had narrowed because of the strides we've made in our culture against tobacco use. That was the good reason. But also because of degenerating use of our forks, deteriorating use of our feet, worsening epidemics of obesity and diabetes. That was the bad reason. So the gap had narrowed. But still in 2004, the leading causes of premature death in the United States and increasingly around the world Bad use every day of feet, forks, and fingers. Lifestyle practices at odds with health. We keep hearing about this. 2009, Earl Ford and colleagues published results of survey research conducted among 23,000 adults in and around Potsdam, Germany. They asked these 23,000 people about 4 ostensible factors influencing their health. They asked them, do you smoke, yes or no? Do you eat well, yes or no? And actually, I'll return to this before I'm done today. But for purposes of this study, eating well meant habitual intake of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. That was enough. That was enough of a flag to identify healthy eating. Keep that in mind. We'll return to that. I'll show you a picture of a house on fire later, and I will remind you that that's enough to identify a healthy eating pattern. All right? So, do you smoke, yes or no? Do you eat well, yes or no? Are you physically active on a regular basis, yes or no? And is your weight well controlled, yes or no? And this audience is far too enlightened to need to hear that one of these things is not like the others. One of these things just doesn't belong. Weight is not a behavior. Weight is an outcome of behaviors. And it's an outcome of things other than behaviors. To the extent that we can control our weight, we control it with 2 things already on Dr. Ford's list: calories in and calories out, diet and physical activity. But 2 people can eat the same, exercise the same, one stays thin, one gets fat. That's not fair. Whoever said life would be fair? Unpleasant things happen to thin people. That's not always fair either. Right? But it's true, and it's true because we are biologically different from one another. Right? Different hair color, different eye color, different height, and a different propensity to gain weight under the same prevailing environmental circumstances due to ethnic heritage, genetic polymorphisms, variations in our microbiota. Right? I digress, though. Back to Dr. Ford's list. So we'll call these factors. 3 are behaviors, 1's an outcome. And what Dr. Ford and colleagues did was compare the 2 ends of the spectrum. So they compared, I don't smoke, I eat well, I'm active, my weight's fine, to I smoke, eat badly, don't exercise, and my weight's out of control. These people, over the span of their lifetimes, this was a retrospective cohort study, had an 80% lesser rate of all major chronic disease than these people. Flip the switch from bad to good on any one of these factors, and the lifetime probability of all major chronic disease, heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia. Meg made the point on the panel last night, we need to find the buttons that people need pushed. It may very well be that talking about brain health is a more potent motivator than talking about cardiac health. But it's on that same list. As I suspect most of you know, Alzheimer's dementia may be characterized as a form of cardiovascular disease, or perhaps more accurately, as type 3 diabetes. Essentially, a variant of insulin resistance selectively affecting the central nervous system. It shares risk factors for all of those other chronic diseases. Flip the switch from bad to good on any one of these 4 factors, the lifetime probability of all major chronic disease, including dementia, was reduced 50%. But fire on all 4 cylinders, and the lifetime probability of heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia, etc., was reduced a stunning 80%. Folks, we're done, right? Lifestyle medicine, the case has been made. Case closed, slam dunk. There it is, right there. What pill could do that? Imagine the tumult were an FDA-approved drug to be announced that is accessible to all, stunningly free of side effects, shockingly inexpensive, safe enough for children and octogenarians alike, and taken once daily for the rest of our lives, would prevent all major chronic disease 8 times in 10. Imagine the tumult. Boy, I would want stock in that company, right? We are that company. I have stock in this company. Nothing can do what lifestyle medicine can do. Nobel Prizes in medicine were recently announced. Damn it, they overlooked me again. My mother was really upset. She was sure it was going to be this year. In any event, you know, the Nobel Prize in medicine, that's a big deal, and it was awarded for essentially genes that function as the body's GPS. But the thing about Nobel Prizes that makes them magnificent is not the recipient of the prize. It's not about that person or that group of people. It's about the capacity to advance the human condition by advancing the frontier of what we know. We all win when there's a Nobel Prize. But Nobel Prizes are about learning what we didn't know. Lifestyle medicine is about using what we do. And if you go away from this conference with nothing else nagging at you, let it be this: we know enough to eliminate 80% of all chronic disease right now. We've known enough for decades. We don't need another Nobel Prize to do that. We just need to use what we know. The Nobel Prizes may help address the residual 20%, but we know enough right now. That's what Ford's study tells us, and it's not just Ford's trial, and it's not just McGinnis and Fegan, it's not just Mocdad. We keep getting reaffirmation of this. There was a cohort study in the UK a few years back by Kavavic et al., same findings. Another more recently here in the US by McCullough et al., same findings. I trust you heard just a couple of weeks ago there was a study pointing out, as if we didn't know this already, that in men, in this particular case, 4 out of 5 coronary events were preventable with healthy lifestyle practices, right? Over and over and over again, this same message. And we have also long known, courtesy to one of our luminaries in the field of lifestyle medicine, Dean Ornish, that these effects reverberate to within the double helix of DNA. Practitioners of lifestyle medicine should routinely make the case that DNA is not destiny. We live in the epigenetic age. Dinner is destiny. The things that we do every day are so powerful they can alter gene expression. In this study by Dean and colleagues, they enrolled 30 men with early-stage prostate cancer, amenable to watchful waiting, and rather than just watch or wait, they gave these men lifestyle as medicine. Optimal plant-based eating, routine physical activity, obviously no tobacco, good sleep, stress mitigation, strong social bonds. And that, by the way, and there's some debate about this, and we have to rally around our definition, but for me, the definition of lifestyle medicine, it's a 6-cylinder engine: feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. Get those 6 right. After that, everything is vanishingly less important. All right? They got those 6 right. And over a span of months, went on to study not so much the men and not so much the cancer in the men, but the genes in the men with the cancer. And what they found is that the lifestyle intervention took 500 cancer promoter genes and dramatically downregulated their expression, 50 cancer suppressor genes and dramatically upregulated their expression. My friends, forswear the nature-nurture debate. It is unnecessary. It is a distraction. The reality is we can nurture even nature. That's what lifestyle medicine does, and this is a branch of the literature filling up fast. So whenever I'm handed a microphone, I like to make the case that the master levers of medical destiny have been in our hands. They are not at the cutting edge of biomedical advance. They are not the subject of Nobel Prizes. They're not the tools of the medical trade, nothing we carry through the corridors of hospitals, not PET or SPECT or fMRI or robotic surgery. The master levers of medical destiny are what we do every day with our feet, our forks, and our fingers. And I trust you all know what Archimedes told us about a lever. Give me one long enough, and I can move the whole world. Make no mistake, these levers are long enough and should long since have served to move our whole culture, modern public health, and epidemiology to a better place, largely free of chronic disease. But, alas, this year as last, much remains lost in translation. We like to say knowledge is power. That's right up there with where there's a will, there's a way. You know what? Sometimes there's a will and you can't find the way, or there ain't no way, or the way is under construction, right? You need will and way. They're not the same. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is generally prerequisite to power. Knowledge is necessary for power. Knowledge is not sufficient. The gap between what we have long known about lifestyle medicine and what our culture routinely does with it belies that wishful thinking. The great challenge for us all is the challenge of translation, turning what we know into what we do, bridging the divide between knowledge and power. We talked about this on the panel last night. I'll make the case again right now. We cannot stay stuck in the status quo. It's unsustainable. We've been looking at these maps for a long time, right? Is there anybody in the room who hasn't seen these maps showing the trends in obesity? Oh, dear God, not the maps. 1985, 1995, 2010. Have you all seen 2013? That's hot off the presses, a whole new set of colors. It just keeps getting bleaker, right? And then the reason we talk about obesity in this context is not because we care about what we see in the mirror. I suspect most of us do, and I think that's fine. But we're talking about something much more than skin deep. Obesity is the canary in the coal mine of chronic disease and modern epidemiology. And where there is more obesity, there is more heart disease, there is more cancer, there is more stroke, there is more dementia, and most indelibly, there is more diabetes. And so the trends in diabetes, 94 to 2010, exactly mirror the trends in obesity as we would expect. So we've been hearing for quite some time, we are neglecting to use what we know. We are failing to convert knowledge into the power of routine action, and we are reaping the whirlwind. We know that we have 27, 28 million diagnosed diabetics in the US right now. We've been told for some time that should current trends persist, should we fail in our collective mission, 1 in 3 of us will be diabetic by mid-century. It's 100 million people. And as we discussed last night, it cannot come to pass. You're here for a health conference. I'm a public health physician. We're all involved in a shared mission, but the mission is bigger than any of us realized when we signed up. Because frankly, if 100 million of us have a chronic, potentially disabling, costly disease beginning at every younger age, it is the fate of the nation that hangs in the balance. How can the US be solvent with 100 million diabetics? We're having trouble paying the bills right now, right? That's what all the hullabaloo over health care reform was about. It's expensive. Nobody wants to pay all that money. If it were free, there would have been no fuss. It's not free. I don't think we can afford 100 million diabetics. I really don't. And that's where we're headed, to say nothing of all the other chronic disease. It's our job to put out that fire. So we've been in the frying pan, the flames are rising, and in fact, we're already seeing evidence that the CDC projections in this regard seem to be quite accurate. We're on track for that 1 in 3 of us being diabetic. We're seeing signs that with successive birth cohorts, the controversial mortality toll of obesity actually is rising. You know, you probably are aware of some of the controversies regarding the impact of obesity per se on mortality. But consider that when we look at people dying today, they tend to be older people. And whatever the role of obesity in their lives, they grew up in a world before Facebook and Twitter and all the things that we spend all our time doing these days, right? They grew up in a world where they went outside and played kickball and dodgeball and baseball. They did not have epidemic childhood obesity. So the timeline of influence was much shorter for them. So we have no idea what the mortality impact is of obesity until we start looking at kids who grew up mired in it. And with each successive birth cohort, we find that more kids are doing just that, and the mortality impact is rising. This was a very sophisticated analysis, filling a critical gap in what we thought we knew. We're seeing a rise, of course, in diabetes in ever younger people. And then just recently, we heard maybe our goose is just plain cooked. Because remember that 1 in 3 projection we made? It's too damn low. Actually, 40% of us are going to be diabetic. And in ethnic minority groups, because of the disparities that persist in our culture, 1 in 2. Now, I trust you may also have seen one study that said we've plateaued rates of diabetes like obesity. So there was a little bit of good news in the mix. But for the most part, it's been a steady stream of bad news on this topic. And we can't let this come to pass because our goose will be well and truly cooked if it does. And the writing is on the wall, of course, for the next generation and the next and the next. How many of you are parents? Grandparents? Aunts or uncles? Know a kid? I always feel badly about leaving anybody out. Anyway, I have 5 children, and you think about passion. You know, frankly, if I had to come up with a one-word answer to, you know, what do we need to fix this? That would be my choice. If I had to pick one word, I'd pick passion. And nothing inspires passion more than the people in our lives we love. The skin we've all got in the game, the intimate skin, people we love, people whose faces light up our lives. So I think about my children and the world that we bequeath to them. I think about grandchildren and what needs to happen after that, right? So we can give them a world where things are much better, or we can give them a world where these are the statistics reported: a 35% increase in the rate of stroke among kids 5 to 14 years old because of epidemic childhood obesity. I really have trouble coming up with anything more unconscionable than a stroke in an 11-year-old that a societal commitment to better use of feet and forks could have prevented. But that has come to pass here. It happens. This then is the nature of the dark wood. These are the dark clouds over the enterprise. And it's a slightly lugubrious way to start the gate, forgive me. But, good news. Where there are dark clouds, often there's a silver lining. This is no exception. Let's take a look at that. This is the inspiration. It's not the bad news about modern epidemiology. It's what we represent about possibility in the world. What if knowledge were power? What if we got the job done? What if the thing that brought us together today resonated out from this room and took over not only our clinical activities at large, but our culture? What if we stopped at nothing to translate what we have long known into what we routinely do? If knowledge were power, if lifestyle were medicine routinely, then I could say to you, we could eliminate 80% of all heart disease. Think about the world you know and imagine that 8 times in 10 heart disease doesn't happen. We could eliminate 90% of all diabetes. Forget about that increase from 27 million to 100 million diabetics. 90% of the 27 million could be non-diabetic. It's a pretty big difference. We could eliminate up to 60% of cancer. We could eliminate most Alzheimer's dementia, multi-infarct dementia, heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia, etc. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. We have the shields. We could defend ourselves. 8 times in 10, it could all go away if knowledge were power. I could say that to you. You know what? I am saying that to you. And I'm citing peer-reviewed articles to back me up. And I asked this of some of you before. I'll ask you all now. Has this slide brought a tear to any eye in the room? A lump to any throat, perhaps. As ever, tearless, lumpless, insensitive bastards. Ashamed to be associated with you people. Not really. See, the thing is, these are stunning statistics, arguably among the most stunning in the history of public health, and certifiably true. But at the end of the day, they are in fact just statistics, numbers, remote. They're dull, they're dry, they're bland, and most importantly, they are anonymous. I've devoted most of my career to public health and have long recognized that the entire effort is encumbered by a potentially crippling fiction, for you see, there is no public. The public is nameless. The public is faceless. The public is impossible to love. There is no public. There's just you and me and everybody else. And I'll ask you to help me demonstrate this. We're here because of what we do professionally. We're here to pay it forward to people we don't know and don't love, although we love helping people. But first and foremost, we're not doctors and nurses and other health professionals. First and foremost, the bonds that tether us to one another are the bonds of our common humanity. We're people, just like everybody else. And we've got exactly the same skin in the game that they do. So forget about what you do professionally. If you or someone you love, just you or someone you love has been affected by heart disease, please raise your hand and keep it up. If you or someone you love, just you or someone you love has been affected by cancer, Please add a hand to those in the air. If you or someone you love has been affected by stroke or diabetes and you don't have a hand in the air, please add a hand. Dementia, add a hand. All hands that went up, put them up. Look around the room, please, folks. In a room, I'll be your proxy, you lazy devils. In a room exclusively full of lifestyle medicine experts, or people aspiring to be, every one of us loves somebody who has been affected by heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia. 5 riders of the modern apocalypse, I suppose. Every one of us. So, conjure to your mind's eye the face of the person you love. Recall the day you got the news, phone call. Maybe it was a trip in an ambulance, or you went to the hospital independently. It was the ER, or the CCU, or the ICU. Maybe they got better and came home. Maybe they did not. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Either way, it was a bad day. Maybe more than one. Look to me like every one of us has been through it. Now think again about children and grandchildren in the world we bequeath them, and consider that if knowledge were power, that if we stopped at nothing to take this mission about which we are so passionate and operationalizing it in the world, 8 out of 10 of us in this room would not have had cause to raise our hands, because the phone call would not have come in. That bad day would not have happened. 8 times in 10, chronic disease would not happen. It's not remote. It's not statistical. It's not anonymous. It's in this room. It's up close, and it's incredibly personal. When we part the veil of statistical anonymity, the faces we see looking back at us are the faces of people we know and the faces of people we love. It is for them, perhaps above all, that the promise of all this must be kept. It is for them that the miles of translational effort, however arduous, must be undertaken. All of which I think begs the question, why hasn't this gotten done? We all have skin in the game. We're not talking about remote threats. It's not like 1 case of Ebola in Dallas and then 2 more. That's scary, but how intimate is that really in a population of over 300 million people? We're talking about stuff that has already been transmitted into our own most intimate circles. Something fairly monumental must have been dissuading us from taking the requisite action all this time. And something fairly monumental is, in essence, if you take this and add this, you get this. In much the same way as if you took this and added this, you would get this. Familiar to many of you, I know. My figurative trademark for the better part of 20 years, the polar bear in the Sahara, and this was a point I made on the panel last night. We're really not just up against cultural forces. Culture is not crazy. Why is it that food is the centerpiece of all social interaction? Because throughout most of history, that was the one opportunity people had to feast. Most days were famine of one degree or another. And generosity and love were best expressed with food. I love you, I'll feed you. Now it's I'll love you, have another slice of cake, I'll see you in the coronary care unit, right? It's time to update the love, but culture makes sense in context. What we are surrounded by largely are cultural anachronisms. We are not just up against culture that's crazy. We are up against 6 million years of evolutionary biology. We are adapted to a world where calories were scarce and hard to get and physical activity was unavoidable. It's called survival, and everybody did it every day. We have devised a modern world where physical activity is scarce and hard to get and calories are unavoidable. Houston, we have a problem, and San Diego and every place else. And the point is, you think about the bedrock influence on behavior of biology, and we have no native defenses against caloric excess or the lure of the couch. Tasty, abundant food, all good. No need to be physically active, all good, bring it on, right? We are victims of our own success. these mischievous, ingenious, great big Homo sapien brains of ours, have solved our problems too damn well. We didn't have enough food, we have too much. It wasn't shelf stable, it'll last forever. Beware of that, by the way. The longer the shelf life of the food, the shorter the shelf life of the person eating the food. Too much physical work to do? No problem. We'll design technology to do everything muscles used to do. Welcome to the modern world. We are polar bears in the Sahara with no adaptations to the environment around us, save one, great big Homo sapien brains. The very brains that designed the problem are our best hope of getting out of it. We are arguably smarter than the average bear and can think our way out of this mess. And that's exactly what we need to do, because there are dual challenges. First, establishing where there is, and for today's purpose, as much as I like to talk about that, I won't belabor that point. And second, getting there from here, which I think is the bigger challenge and the one that really deserves our collective attention. And routinely, I address it with the metaphor of a levee. So I began with the master levers of medical destiny. I'll switch metaphors midstream. My mother is a well-published poet. I'm sure she'd cringe, but the rest of you will put up with it. I like the levee metaphor for reasons some of you have heard about before. What challenges us all may be likened to a flood of highly processed, hyper-palatable, nutrient-dilute, energy-dense, glow-in-the-dark, bet you can't eat just one kind of foods. A constant flow of marketing dollars encouraging us and our children to eat the very foods that propel us toward obesity and chronic disease. Wave after wave of technological advance giving us gadgets and gizmos that do everything muscles used to do at work and at play. A great big obesogenic, morbidogenic flood. And if you want to contain and control floodwaters, something like a levee is the right response. I like the levee metaphor because it incrementalizes both the problem and the solution. I've been at this a long time. Esteemed colleagues in the room have been at it even longer, and yet it's not fixed. Cal, how come you haven't run up the white flag a long time ago, right? You've been at this for decades, and we haven't fixed everybody. We should just give up, right? Except I think we recognize as long as you are contributing to the levee and it's rising, eventually you'll win. You just don't win all at once. You don't win all by yourself. But when the height of your levee is higher than the floodwaters, you win. That's the day the ground at your feet dries out and a whole new world of possibility opens up before you. So it incrementalizes the solution. Just stack a bag of sand. And it also is a precautionary tale against the tendency in our culture to look for the active ingredient, the quick fix, the silver bullet, right? Isn't there just one sandbag we can put down and fix it all? I think adherents of the Dr. Oz show would think that there is, right? Just tune in tomorrow and I'll tell you about the one thing, this could save your life, right? So we put down one sandbag and inevitably we're disappointed as hell. Damn it, that didn't fix everything. Whatever the one sandbag was, an intervention at a work site, intervention in a school, a 1 penny tax on soda, banning big soda, well, whatever the initiative is, it doesn't fix everything, right? How could it possibly fix everything? Because so much is broken. So the only solution is a comprehensive array of programs, policies, strategies, every place where people and lifestyle come together, for good or for ill. And so for that reason, my career is all about this. I am a sandbagger and not ashamed to say it. That's what I do back at the ranch. Manufacture, test, stack, and as appropriate, attempt to disseminate sandbags. And I recognize that we really have two options. Change the world or change the people so they can deal with the world. And one of the things I've done recently is consider, well, how do I manage to be healthy in spite of it all? I'm pretty busy. I have all the same challenges as everyone else. I live in the same world. Well, we all have skills, for the most part, people in this room, that the average citizen does not. So my most recent book, Disease Proof, is about skilled power. Basically wrote down everything I rely on all the time to deal with the world as it is. Because we can't just keep waiting on the world to change. That's a slow process. But I now want to shift our attention to what I think really matters. Usually at this stage in a talk, I tell you about the stuff that I've been doing. I tell you about the various programs we've developed and tested and the publications to back them up, like Nutrition Detectives, and ABC for Fitness, and ABE for Fitness, and the Unjunk Yourself videos, and a new recipe website. By the way, this is great. Check it out. It's called Quizinicity, keynote.com, free recipes, Katz family approved. Really great. It's a beautiful site. Cuisinicity, like cuisine-icity. Right? Really nice. Help yourselves. All these programs are freely available. Or like NuVal, our nutrition guidance system, the first ever shown to correlate directly with chronic disease and all-cause mortality. Usually that's what I talk about now. I'm not going to talk about that now. What I wanted to do with you this morning was tell you what I want to be when I grow up. Because having been at this quite a long time now, I'm thinking about what I hope my legacy will be. What does it matter that I was once president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine? What measurable difference will that leave behind in the world? That's where my thoughts are now, and that's where I want to take the talk. So it's important for all of us, with all due humility, to recognize, first, if you are involved in healthcare, we have a tendency, and I think this may have gone a little too far last night, we have a tendency in advancing our own cause, righteous as it is, much as it deserves to be advanced, we have a tendency to disparage other causes. I'm an internist. I'm proud to be an internist. I have been there at the bedside in hours of dire need and desperation and deep anguish and even death. I've watched people die. I've been there to hold their hands as they've died. I am proud of the responsibility, the intimate privileges, and the power of tending the sick. There is no shame in that. And yes, drugs have figured in it. And yes, surgery has figured in it. I'm not ashamed of that. I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that modern medicine can do a lot of good. And tending the sick is a noble calling. But we want to do more. We want to prevent the people from getting sick in the first place. But we need to recognize that as it is currently constructed, much about healthcare isn't about caring for health, it's about caring for disease. It's a disease care system, it's a sick care system, but very often we hear that in the context of denigration. I don't take it as such. Okay, guilty as charged. I take care of sick people. I'm at their bedside in their hour of greatest need. I'm proud of that. I think we can all be proud of that. It's a different mission. But how much better it would be if fewer people got that sick in the first place. I did sequential residencies in internal medicine and preventive medicine because spending 120 hours a week in the hospital training in internal medicine and being a forest through the trees kind of guy, I couldn't help but notice that 8 out of 10 of those people never needed to get that sick in the first place. This was avoidable misery. I thought, once I've recognized that, how can I not devote myself to that cause? How can I keep tending to people who are miserable and destined to remain so despite my best efforts when I might have done something to help them avoid this misery altogether? Dual missions, both noble. Okay? Healthcare, for the most part, does not make health. Health is built by people every day with the choices they make, with the lifestyles they live, the things they do where they work and learn and love and pray and play. And yes, we need to have a hand in it, because if we are not a part of the solution, whether it's primary care or experts in lifestyle medicine, if we are not a part of the solution, of course, we are part of the problem, merely by abdicating. For evil to prevail in the world, it is enough for good people to do nothing. We cannot do nothing, right? But we also should resist the inclination to overreach and recognize we will only be part of the solution. To help enable that, there are many good programs. We heard about CHIP from Darren yesterday. There are other good programs. But I offer you this one. So here's my one giveaway. OUCH is a free online CME program. It stands for Online Weight Management Counseling for Healthcare Professionals. We've developed this based on 15 years of work translating the trans-theoretical model into a primary care setting and making it very streamlined. So you can actually do behavior modification counseling in 90 to 120 seconds. That much better, by the way, if you put together group visits and you have 90 minutes. But you can do this in 90 seconds. And this program is freely available to all with 4 hours of Category 1 CME credit from Yale. Now, that's a long URL. You're trying to write it down, don't bother. For one thing, Grace took my slides, so I'm sure she'll get them to you. And for another, if you just go to my website or Google OUCH program, you'll pull this right up. But help yourselves. It's 4 simple, streamlined modules. It really, for those of you who are not already expert in behavior modification techniques, it'll definitely help you. And 4 hours of CME credit into the bargain. And the idea here, really the idea behind John's initial vision in establishing the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, is that we can, in fact, incorporate lifestyle into medicine more, and we can do a lot of good accordingly. But what we really want, I think, is that elusive paradigm shift we love to talk about, where in fact we change everything, where lifestyle supports health, doesn't conspire against it, and everybody simply needs a whole lot less medicine. So if lifestyle is the medicine, I think the question for us all, and it needs to be approached with a blend of boldness and humility, is what is in fact the best spoon? Lord knows in the modern world the last thing we need is more spoons full of sugar to help the medicine go down, right? But we need some kind of spoon, and I think the big spoon is culture. I think lifestyle is the most effective medicine, where culture is the spoon. Now, I am in no way suggesting that it's not crucial for clinicians to get in the game. Quite the contrary, we're the tip of the spear. We need to lead the cultural revolution. And clinical models of delivering effective lifestyle counseling, absolutely essential, but only because we live in a culture that is not conducive to health. We need to change our culture. Tip of the spear, right? But ultimately, clinical medicine is not the best means of delivering lifestyle. Lifestyle is not a clinical enterprise, is it? How people eat and if they're active every day and sleep. And these don't need to be clinical things at all. Lifestyle is the medicine. Culture is the spoon. And we have pretty good evidence of it. As I mentioned last night, you look around the world, as Dan Buettner has done in the Blue Zones Project, at the people who live the longest, the best, have the least chronic disease. They live to be 100 years old, go to sleep one night and just don't wake up. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. That's how it's done, people. They do it more often than the rest of us. They do not attribute these blessings to really swell counseling by their clinician. They don't. They live in parts of the world where the native diet is a good diet. Real food, not too much, mostly plants. They live in a part of the world where they use their feet routinely. They live in a part of the world where people tend not to smoke. They sleep enough. They're not stressed out. They love one another, strong social bonds, feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. Clinicians do not figure in it. Culture is the spoon. Blue zones are a pretty good demonstration of that. And the question then is, what might we do about it? And what I'm sharing with you this morning for the first time ever, hot off the presses, is my dream, what I think we might accomplish in the world. I call it GLiMMER, and I like to think that it might light the way to a healthier world. It stands for Global Lifestyle Medicine Movement to Effect Revolution, because we really need more than just reform, right? We've had healthcare reform, and what did it really do? Change the way we pay for disease care. That's not meaningful reform, right? I mean, that's a very modest tweak. We need a revolution where lifestyle becomes the medicine. This is a schematic for GLiMMER that I put together, which will mean absolutely nothing to you. That's pretty. A glimmer of hope. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. All right, so here's the primer. First, what we come together to address in particular at this conference is lifestyle in medicine. Very important. But I think above that resides lifestyle as medicine. What is our role in achieving cultural delivery models of lifestyle medicine? Let's talk about propagating blue zones. What about the idea that we could turn blue zones into blueprints? Are there any efforts to indicate that's possible? And then, what is the scope of clinical applications of lifestyle medicine? Ideally, a calming influence on some of the frenetic forces in modern healthcare, so I call it CALM. Clinical applications of lifestyle medicine. And then, if we can propagate blue zones, how do we tailor that to very different communities around the world? What do we know? What's the science related to that? Can we evaluate the effectiveness of this enterprise? Are there methods? And in fact, one in particular called the multi-site translational community trial that my group was involved in developing. And then, are there research networks that are well suited to demonstrate our capacity to propagate blue zone culture? And as we return then to the schematic, this is what all the alphabet soup on there referred to, and the arrows indicate the direction of support. Now, I guess I kind of have to pick a side here. I'll go left. So essentially, LAM over here is Lifestyle as Medicine, Blue Zone Propagation Project, Blue Zones to Blueprints. We'll talk about the rest of this. This would be the research activity demonstrating that we're actually achieving conversion of culture in some fixed geography. This is Lifestyle in Medicine. It's what many of us do, practice models, business models, because as we discussed yesterday evening, it's got to be paid for, right? One of the impediments to more lifestyle in medicine is we're not very well reimbursed for doing that, are we? Okay, we need to fix that. It obviously needs to suffuse through medical education, and there are policy reimbursement implications. So I'm just going to go through this and share this vision with you. So what is the overview of GLiMMER? I think, and again, this is what I hope my legacy will prove to be, having one time been president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, looking back on today. Why did it matter? What do I hope the legacy will be? Well, I think we need to conjoin the efforts to promote lifestyle in medicine and lifestyle as medicine, each lending critical support to the other, and each deriving support from an expansive true health coalition. I'll describe that in more detail in just a minute. How is it that lifestyle in medicine, lifestyle as medicine would support one another? Well, lifestyle in medicine takes advantage of the imprimatur we have as healthcare professionals to help people understand what really matters. We convey this message with passion and conviction. The prize, more years in life, more life in years, bequeathing those blessings to your kids. You love your kids? What is the greatest gift you could give your kids? How about a much enhanced likelihood of a long, vital life? Can anything rival that? Help people understand what's at stake. Help them appreciate they've all got skin in the game. We are the tip of the spear. We are the clearest voice. So we can affect culture change from clinics on outward. But, talked about this last night as well, we do effective lifestyle counseling and then send people out into a world that sabotages every bit of good sense we shared with them, right? We are less effective. But what about a culture that says we're going to pay attention to what the clinicians are advising and we're going to do everything possible to back them up? We in the media are going to try to back them up. We in food service are going to try to back them up. We have to pay attention too. We've got children too. We're going to listen to them. We employers are going to listen to them. We running public schools are going to listen to them. We in supermarkets are going to listen to them. We're going to try and create programming that enables you to follow the good advice you got from your clinician. How do we achieve that? I'll come back to that in just a second. I see the mission here, and I hope we all agree. I think we want to add years to life, and we want to add life to years. I mean, if lifestyle medicine could be leveraged to give people the longest, most vital lives possible, we're done. Mission accomplished, right? If lifestyle medicine were universally accessible, and we could measure the years we've added to people's lives and the life we've added to people's years. And when I think about what I hope my epitaph will be, just looking for the guy made a measurable difference. And I want it measured in this currency. That's it, right? So that's the goal here. And again, clinicians, I think, are at the tip of the spear to advance this cause. And ideally, I think we should all be involved in replicating Blue Zones. It's the best information we've got about healthy living at the population level. And the vision, basically, is that Earth is not just a beautiful blue planet, but the whole darn globe is a blue zone. Why should some people have those blessings and the rest of us look on longingly? If we know how to do it, why not share? Why not figure out how to make every population a blue zone population? 80% of chronic disease goes away everywhere. So for lifestyle in medicine, what we tend to focus on here, I think we can go beyond the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. We can be the convener, but I think we can have a global coalition of lifestyle medicine organizations. I've already spent the months leading up to this conference in conversation with my colleagues around the world. They want to play. So the head of the European Association for Lifestyle Medicine wants to play. Gary Egger, who was mentioned last night, who runs the Australian College of Lifestyle Medicine, wants to play. We all come together. We form a global coalition. And it's not just us, but it's a bigger group then working on the development, refinement, dissemination of best practice models. We create online portals. We create conferences that bring us all together, and we're starting to do that already. But we share best practices. We contribute to medical education routinely at all levels. Undergraduate, residency training, continuing medical education. That process is underway. And collectively, we don't just go to payers as the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, but we go as a global lifestyle medicine movement with experts from all around the world and sit down with payers and talk about the ROI that they need to see and the evidence from models of intervention that have different payment systems than we do all around the world. And clinicians participate in the True Health Coalition. Again, I'll come back to what I mean by that in a second. And that's basically providing aid out to culture change. But we're also able to leverage the cultural supports I was talking about, and that's aid in. We will be more effective as clinician experts in lifestyle medicine when our culture is with us rather than against us. There already is a lifestyle as medicine movement underway. So again, Dan Buettner is a National Geographic Fellow. His work began with what was really an ethnographic project, looking around the world and identifying those populations where people live the longest and the best. It's called the Blue Zone Project. I've been speaking to Dan leading up to this conference. Dan wants to play, and what Dan is already doing is collaborating with Healthways and identifying sites where there is key on-the-ground leadership ready to change. Think about the stages of change, trans-theoretical model. They're ready to change. They reject 5 out of 6 sites that say they want to become a blue zone because they're not ready. But the 1 in 6, they work with. Blue Cross Blue Shield pays the bills. Why? Because they do this in areas where they've got significant penetration. And if they can add years to life, and more importantly, life to years and prevent chronic disease, their cost of business go down. So the Blues are willing to spend tens of millions of dollars in statewide and citywide initiatives to affect health-promoting culture change because they expect an ROI measurable in dollars. Frankly, I'd settle for an ROI measured in human potential. But we'll take the dollars too. Why not, right? That's why they're in the game. This is already happening. So there is a current Blue Zone propagation project. It involves dedicated boots on the ground. But what I think we could do is create a standing army with a trust fund, the trust fund that is devoted to this project, GLiMMER. I'll come back to that in just a second, where we, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, with colleagues around the world, are the convener. And it's not just Dan going with his tin cup to Blue Cross Blue Shield to get funding for a local site, but he does that after we provide core funding and core personnel, that this fund supports this effort so it's permanent. It's the difference basically between convening a militia and having a standing army. We would be the standing army. And the Global Coalition of Lifestyle Medicine Experts would be collaborating in this effort all the time. There would be, in addition to what the Blue Zone Project has going on now, we would add expert evaluation, including the multi-site translational community trial. We could involve the Prevention Research Center network. And then there is a critical role for what I keep referring to as the True Health Coalition, and I will tell you what I mean by that. In terms of expert evaluation, we worked with Larry Green at the CDC, and after years of doing community-based participatory research, which is what the PRCs do, we developed a specific methodology. I won't bore you with the details, but last night, how many of you were here at the panel session? So I mentioned last night the diabetes prevention program, that we were able, with that trial, to demonstrate a 58% reduction in incident diabetes with a lifestyle intervention, but nobody knows how to make it play in Peoria, right? So what about studies designed to show we can make it play in Peoria and San Diego and everywhere else? Well, we don't really have a method for that. Implementing culture change in multiple sites using locally tailored methods, but with common metrics. So the outcome measures have to be the same. Some of the stipulations of the trial methodology have to be the same. But there has to be enough malleability to allow for cultural tailoring. It has to be site-specific. Well, we designed a method, and I commend the paper to you. It's called the Multi-Site Translational Community Trial. It's a method perfectly suited to look at what Dan Buettner and Healthways are doing and measure the impact they're having. I asked Dan if they'd published any data. They have. The Blues have some proprietary data, but those of us in this room, we were talking last night about evidence, we want to point to this and say, my God, look what can be achieved. We want to point to their data in the New England Journal of Medicine. We won't find them. They're locked up in some file cabinet in Blue Cross Blue Shield of Idaho. Doesn't help us very much, right? We need to fix that. And Dan is amenable to working together to fixing that. And we have this network of 26 centers around the country devoted to community-based participatory research. That's part of the answer right there. The NIH also has translational research centers, so there are other resources that potentially could get involved. We, as the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, we, in conjunction with our colleagues around the world, we do have the auctoritas to make this happen, to bring these resources and ally them with the effort to propagate blue zones. It's all part of my dream. I'm just dreaming out loud. That's what's happening. I'm having a dream. You're watching. Okay? What about the True Health Coalition? This is a critical piece. First, it's designed to advance what I have called the use what we know principle. Remember a while ago I told you I'd show you a slide of a house burning down, and I would return to this issue? The critical importance of using what we know. There are luminaries in the room. There are luminaries in our field. And generally, when you've spent decades of your life doing particular work, it's the work you care about most. It just makes sense. That's fine. But we cannot be fractious. We cannot be divisive. I'm going to say something provocative. It doesn't really matter whether an optimal vegan diet or an optimal Mediterranean diet is better. We don't know. We haven't done the study. There has never been a randomized trial where thousands of neonates were assigned to an optimal vegan or an optimal Mediterranean diet for their whole life, followed for 100 years to see who does best. We can debate it as long as it doesn't get in the way of using what we know. Because the public is eating glow-in-the-dark crap. Seriously, right? I mean, while we bicker over my diet can beat your diet, everybody's eating junk. We could all agree if it glows in the dark, you should step away from the box and nobody would get hurt, right? I mean, let's tell them the part of the story on which we agree. The fitness experts all debate the best kind of exercise. Resistance training or no resistance training. The duration and frequency of aerobics. But basically, everybody's sitting on their asses all the time. Getting up and moving is good, right? We fail to convey how extreme our consensus actually is. Routine physical activity, no tobacco, real food, not too much, mostly plants. But there are variations on that theme, right? All of them are better than what people in our culture are eating every day. Yes. Enough sleep, manage your stress, hug somebody, love somebody, right? Don't drink too much alcohol. We could expand the list, but those are the fun. We agree. Does anybody disagree? That's the thing. The public has no idea that a room filled with this many people, with all of our different opinions and expertise, could agree on all that. They have no idea. We have created this pseudo-confusion. It is as if house is on fire. Bring in a lot of expert fire people, and we don't spray any water on the fire. We debate which hose is the best hose. We question whether hard water or soft water would do a better job. And meanwhile, while we're there squabbling, the whole damn house burns to the ground. Can't let that happen. It is my plea to all of you. It's a conversation that played out with John McDougall in the aftermath of last year's conference. We agree on the fundamentals. The problem is, yes, we can tell our particular story. Here's why I really like my approach. But what we cannot do is disparage the other guy. We do too much of that. Folks, let's stop that. We can close the door, beat the hell out of one another if we're so inclined. Open the door, let's sing Kumbaya. We agree on so much. The public needs to know. Now, there are very strong arguments for a vegan diet that have nothing to do with human health. Kinder, gentler treatment of our fellow species. I'm good with that. 4 of my best friends on the planet have 4 legs apiece. 3 dogs and a horse. I'm good with that. I don't eat mammals. And that's why I don't eat mammals. Do I think that grass-fed beef is necessarily bad for people? I actually don't. I just, mammals are part of my family. They're close cousins. I don't eat any of my cousins. But I don't need to proselytize. I can still say people in Mediterranean countries do, and they're a blue zone. They're a blue zone in Crete. The blue zones are not just remarkable for what they have in common, all these fundamentals. They're remarkable for their diversity. They show us that there are variations on the theme, that everyone is entitled to love the food that loves them back. There are different ways to get there from here. let's use what we know and then squabble about the part we don't know or where we disagree. Let's push, push, push on the use what we know message. And so that's what the True Health Coalition is about. In my conversations to date with Dan Buettner, Walter Willett, Michael Sagner, who heads the Association of Lifestyle Medicine in Europe, Gary Egger and others, this is the piece that I think is missing. What if we pulled together leading academics, not just those who routinely agree with one another, but those who routinely bicker? What if we pulled together the paleo advocates and the vegan advocates and the Mediterranean diet advocates, and all of them said, you know, we agree on the fundamentals, real food, not too much, mostly plants, wholesome foods and sensible combinations. We agree on that. We pick different variations on the theme, but we agree on the theme. What if we brought journalists into the mix? What if we got Michael Moss, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Salt, Sugar, Fat, The Extraordinary Science of Addictive Junk Food? What if we got Gary Taubes, who's been a thorn in my side forever, right? I mean, but what, you know, Gary's actually is a decent guy. He means well. We disagree about a lot of stuff. But I think we agree that if it glows in the dark, people shouldn't eat it, right? What if we got all of these apparently dissenting voices to say, actually, yes, the public does deserve to know the part of the story on which we agree? What if we brought economists in to say what the ROI is likely to be, policymakers and government officials? And what if we invited in industry? What about those entities in the food space who actually do the right thing but can't be heard because everybody claims to be doing the right thing, right? You make glow-in-the-dark junk, but you fortify it with 11 essential vitamins and minerals, part of a complete breakfast. Yes, it's the crappy part of a complete breakfast. They don't tell you that part. But it makes it very hard for the stuff sitting next to it on the shelf that's actually good to look good. Because you say it's good and they say it's good. No, you know, all they really did was put lipstick on a pig. But it's hard for the busy shopper to tell the difference. What if we fix that? What if we invited in, we hand select those entities in the food space, both retail and manufacturing, who are doing the right thing, make them part of the True Health Coalition? What if we involved every major clinical organization? What if we said we want the AMA, the American College of Physicians, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Heart Association, we want you to join this True Health Coalition, and what we will do, we will react with, I think it's at the bottom of the slide here, educational organizations. Okay, whoops, I guess I left it out. We will react when there is a new study or when the media goes crazy about, you know, low carb beats low fat. You all got that memo a couple weeks, right? I mean, absolutely the most bogus study ever done, right? Some of you, I hope, have read what I've written on the subject. Others who attend this conference have opined. So absolute rubbish. But what it, you know, if I say it's absolute rubbish, Katz is saying it's absolute rubbish. What if the True Health Coalition, everybody who's anybody in nutrition, epidemiology, public health, food service, with one voice, says, rubbish. What we thought we knew about what's good for people last week, still true. Ignore this, people. What if voices that usually oppose one another came together? Well, my thinking on this topic is what Dan Buettner is able to do right now, and what we should be involved in, is develop a crew, put them on a ship, send the ship into a particular site. So it's a site-specific enterprise where they're trying to propagate blue zones. But the True Health Coalition can be the wind in the sails. Because right now, the reason Dan and his colleagues have to reject 5 sites in 6, they're not ready to change. Why? Well, wait a minute. I don't know that we want to eat a particular way. We heard that low carb is better, and you know, we're confused about the importance of exercise. And don't you guys keep changing your mind every 27 minutes? And you know, so we'd like to be a blue zone, but we're not sure you know the best way, and we want to talk to somebody else. Can we talk to somebody else, right? So there's a lot of resistance because of the incredible volume of cultural noise. What about fixing that? What about being such a piercing signal of clarity, consensus, and truth that we are the wind in all sails and we overwhelm the noise? Just by way of reminder, I'm dreaming out loud and you're watching. That's what's going on here. The organizational elements of GLiMMER, I want to establish a trust fund of about $100 million. Trust fund would spin off an annual interest payment of about $5 million a year. That would be enough to get started. Ultimately, I think this ought to be a $500 million fund. I think with $20 million a year, we could run this robustly all around the world. I've only done back-of-the-envelope budget calculations so far. I need some help with that. But for starters, $100 million dedicated trust fund running this off the interest for GLiMMER, Global Lifestyle Medicine Movement to Effect Revolution. ACLM and the Blue Zones Project would essentially be partners in this enterprise and the co-conveners. We would have dedicated staffing coming from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, from the group currently working on the Blue Zones that involves some healthways people. And then on the research side, I think we should involve the Prevention Research Center program. It's low-hanging fruit. I run one of those things, but we could go elsewhere. It doesn't really matter. There would be a global steering committee. It would be a who's who in lifestyle medicine and effective cultural change models. We would establish this dynamic, multidisciplinary, expansive True Health Coalition. And when it comes to industry or government, membership would be carefully vetted. It would be an iterative process to make sure that only the virtuous enter. And those who do enter, it would be a mark of distinction. You know, imagine you're a company that makes food, your Annie's Own or your Kind Bars, and you are a member of the True Health Coalition. We should give them a logo that says that. We make true food, we tell the truth about food, and it's not us saying so. It's this unbelievable group saying so. So when we talk, you can trust us. Trust. It's about trust. And then, thank you, and then the critical issue is we speak nimbly, responsively to what's going on in the world around us with one voice. Now, operationally, that's challenging, but it can be done. It can be done. Unlike many dreamers, I've spent my career operationalizing. This can be done. It's not just a dream. Again, last night we were talking about the future. The best way to predict the future is to create it, and the best way to create the best future is to dream about it first. But then once you've dreamed about reaching the heights, you need a ladder or a scaffold. You've got to operationalize. You've got to get up there. So how do we operationalize this dream? First, meetings are underway to secure pilot funding. We only need about $100,000, $150,000 to run a 6-year proof of principle project. Can we, in fact, get these people to play? Can I get signatures from the leadership in lifestyle medicine all around the world? Can I get Dan Buettner to sign something? Can I get Gary Taubes and Michael Moss and Walter Willett? And you guys can send me names, whoever you think ought to be involved. Michael Pollan. Can we get all of them to say, yes, if you build it, we will come? Because I'll tell you, I think we can. Because I've already started the party, and so far everybody's saying, yes, I want an invitation. So I think we could prove that we could build it, and I think we can do the proof of principle pilot with just about 3 FTEs for approximately 6 months. And yes, I think we can get the money. Working on it. Need some help, but I think it can be done. Once we prove that anybody who's anybody in this space is willing to join this effort, that it will be the most piercing voice for advancing health ever put together, well, then I think we can secure the $100 million. Because it won't be me asking, and it won't even be the American College of Lifestyle Medicine asking. It will be a global coalition of leadership in this space across every sector. And we will ask and say, build it because we want to change the world. This is a legacy in the making, right? So yes, I think we can get the $100 million then and grow it to $500 million. And then we would staff up and we would start selecting members of the True Health Coalition. We would activate and we would try to start growing this thing so that we turn our blue planet into a blue zone and we light the way to health for the world. This is what I want to do when I grow up. And I don't think we can wait much longer, both because I'm getting older every day and because we have come to that proverbial fork in the road. And you know what Yogi Berra says about that, right? Come to a fork in the road, you've got to take it. For far too long in our culture, health has languished on an obstacle course. Health has been on the road not taken. I think we want to be effective clinicians, yes, but what we'd really like to see is a better world around us, one in which health is on a path of lesser resistance. I have a dream that that can come true if we see the forest through the trees and take the right path out of the dark wood. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Folks, join me. Let's change the world. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Good start. Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good start. Thank you, Dr. Katz. We will begin some questions. We have a few at some point. Of course, we'll have to cut that off, the questions off. So if you do have questions, this is our one mic, so go ahead and come on up.
My name is John Testerman from Loma Linda.
Morning, John.
Less than 2 hours from here, we have a
Blue zone.
family medicine. Yes.
You have a blue zone, too.
Yes, sort of a mixed blue zone, but blue parts of it anyway.
Yeah.
In the city of San Bernardino, there's a federally qualified health center called SAC Health System, where we have family medicine residents and combined family medicine / preventive medicine residents combined program, working to see patients in a poverty-stricken population. And what we have run into is the socioeconomic determinants of health. So as one example, there was a lot of effort by a medical student there to educate a patient about a healthy diet and so forth. At the end, he says, well, I'm homeless and I get all my food from the dumpster behind the McDonald's. And we run into people who don't live in neighborhoods that are safe enough to go out and exercise. The grocery stores don't have fresh fruits and vegetables, and the cheapest calories available are at McDonald's. And so do you envision any kind of program whereby we get involved, which means politically, and in many other areas in cities and city councils and things like that, to try to address some of the socioeconomic determinants of health?
Thank you for the question, John. Absolutely, yes. Some of you may know of a great book by, among others, my former colleague at Yale, Ted Marmer, Why Some People Are Healthy and Others Are Not. If you haven't read it, I think it's one of the great contributions to public health. It's all about the social determinants of health. And we've heard more recently that our medical destinies have more to do with our zip code than our genetic code, right? So, profound environmental influences. Actually, John's story reminds me of a time I was precepting in a clinic with residents many years ago, and I had a very frustrated resident trying to talk a patient into smoking cessation. And this patient just wouldn't quit smoking. So I said, well, let's see what we can accomplish together. Went in the room, spent some time talking with the patient. It turns out she, too, was homeless, living under a railroad bridge with a daughter to look after. Smoking was the least of her problems. So at the individual level, I think one of the things we have to do is recognize some people live in a very difficult world. And we need a therapeutic alliance. We need to go where they are. I've placed the emphasis on culture, but I also made very clear, I revere what we do as clinicians. And one of the things we do that culture really can't do is deliver messages and deliver strategies with the N of one finesse. It can't be about everybody. It's got to be about you. So, finding a home and engaging social service and address, what are the challenges that led to the homelessness, and can we get at that? There will be a role always, I think, for that N of one level of care, that intimacy. So that's a critical step. In terms of the broader advocacy, yes, I think one of the things we rally for in lifestyle medicine is overcoming disparities. But I'm going to say something that may seem slightly heretical here. I was having a conversation with Mark Berman, if he's in the room at dinner last night. You can probably guess my politics, right? Anybody want to guess my politics? You can guess my politics. So you know which way I lean as a public health type. I only quote Reagan on very rare occasions. I like trust but verify. I think that's a good one. I don't really believe in trickle-down economics, but believe it or not, I sort of do believe in trickle-down nutrition. So you talk about supermarkets that only sell junk. Why? Well, they sell the junk made by manufacturers who are selling to the population at large. If there are no manufacturers who can profit from making junk, there is no junk. And so it may very well be that the bodega isn't stocked with, you know, every variety of fruit and vegetable you find at Dean and DeLuca, but they would be stocked with beans and lentils and whole grains, inexpensive, highly nutritious foods that everybody could get and afford, and it's a good place to start. But there wouldn't be Lucky Charms cereal if the middle class refuses to buy Lucky Charms cereal. The day we wake up, snap out of our Slim Fast-induced coma and recognize that multicolored marshmallows are not part of a complete breakfast, they'll stop selling the crap. And when they do, it can't flow down to the bodega. So, you know, food deserts are places that have two problems. One, they don't have access to food we wish they had access to. We need to work to fix that. Absolutely critical emphasis on social determinants of health. But two, they do have food that's junk, manufactured by companies that profit from selling junk, and they profit mostly not from the little bit of residuum that winds up on the shelf of the bodega. They profit by selling it to us and our families and our patients. When we say no, that goes away. And by the way, one final comment about that. The ability of a change in demand to transform the food supply, we've seen it. Natural experiments. And we didn't necessarily like them, but they happened. We got hung up on low fat. Now, we did it wrong. You know, we didn't eat the way Cal advises, or Dean advises, or John advises, or Joel advises. We never did that. And we got a low-fat message. Did we all start eating more kale? No, we ate Snackwell cookies. Why? Because the food industry heard the message and said, goody, we'll invent highly profitable, high-calorie, low-fat junk food. Tell them that's what they thought they wanted, and they'll buy it. And we did. But the interesting thing is there was no legislation, there was no policy, but every supermarket in the country filled up with low-fat food. And then we did it again. We said, aha, we know what the problem is. We got the wrong macronutrient, right? We weren't supposed to cut fat. We were supposed to cut carbs. Well, frankly, even Atkins, and I didn't agree with Atkins about anything, but even Atkins didn't say eat low-carb brownies. He said eat more meat and eat more cheese. We got low-carb brownies, right? The food industry said, goody, a whole new way to engineer junk food. Let's do it again, right? So if we simply said we're done with that, we only buy truly nutritious food, we have good evidence that they would come around and make more nutritious food. And yes, that would influence what happens even in those very challenged neighborhoods. Pretty much the same thing with physical activity. If sidewalks and opportunities to walk to and from work and school were normal in our culture, they would be more normal in challenged neighborhoods. Now, you have a neighborhood that's overrun with drugs or crime or violence, it still wouldn't be safe to use those neighborhoods. We will always have those problems to wrestle with, too. It's a parallel issue. But it's more likely that there would be sidewalks in the first place if our culture were devoted to better use of feet, right? So I think it's a combination. I think culture change is the rising tide that can lift all boats, including those disenfranchised neighborhoods. And then we need targeted attention at those neighborhoods and the social determinants. But at the end of one level, somebody needs to help this poor person get a house and figure out why she's homeless in the first place. And after that, she may say, thank you, now I trust you. Now, what was that you were trying to tell me about healthy living? Because I'll listen to you now.
Hi, Tim Guthrie, family doc from the Olympic Peninsula, certified in functional medicine and using those tools in kind of more of a traditional family practice model. My question is, my main baptism in the subject at hand, it was in the Institute for Functional Medicine. Some of my colleagues are in the A4M. I am now visiting with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, who, of course, wants to lead this coalition, as I'm sure does Mark Hyman and the leaders of the A4M. And I almost despair. I got a little tear in a lump when you put all these people together working and stopping the differences and focusing on the commonalities. But is the American College of Lifestyle Medicine ready to take a back seat to some other name if that's what it takes to bring the group together? Or do you envision some as yet unnamed coalition bringing this together?
Well, I'm using the name GLiMMER just to describe this. You know, we can come up with a better one. I think it works pretty well, but it really should be about the project. The money would have to park somewhere, either a nonprofit that is related to or independent of the entities involved. And so someone would be the convener. You generally need something like that to establish trust with the person who's going to help pay the bills or that group of people. But otherwise, absolutely yes. The very thing we do not want, and Mark would be on my list of people to invite, so the leadership of functional medicine. But again, what we all have to agree on, we look one another in the eyes, we shake hands and say what this is about is the part of the story we have in common. We can all disperse and emphasize the part of the story where we disagree. You know, a greater role for nutrient supplements, nutraceuticals, addressing biochemical pathways, a greater emphasis on sleep. Frankly, I think you guys are underemphasizing the mind-body interface. Everybody can have their shtick. But the goal of the True Health Coalition would be to map out that portion of the lifestyle as medicine story on which we do agree and tell that. And then, yeah, I don't care. I mean, frankly, there should be nobody in the front seat. The only person who obviously deserves marquee placement here is Dan, because Dan is out there doing this already, Dan Buettner, right? So the Blue Zone Propagation Project is underway, and they are not ideologues. One of the things I like most about that is, you know, Dan, with equal enthusiasm, characterized the lifestyle in Crete, and the lifestyle in Loma Linda, and the lifestyle in Costa Rica, and the lifestyle in Okinawa. He doesn't care. He said, you know, it looks to me like there are different ways to get there from here, but what they do in common is more alike than different. By the way, Dan's got a book that's coming out soon on the diets in the blue zones. It's great. I have a review copy. It's really great. And it's going to be more of the same. We should be telling the world the part of the story we agree on. You know, the interesting thing, just to go back to that, before there was functional medicine, I don't know quite what the tenure of the organization is. Do you?
I would say roughly 25, 30 years.
All right. So it may have... Jet Bland could tell us. So maybe it existed, but it was nascent. Cal had probably done some of his work, but maybe hadn't published. Dean hadn't published his studies. I'm thinking back to 1993. So, John hadn't published yet. McDougall. Joel Furman hadn't done his work yet. Colin Campbell published the China study in 2005. That's just 9 years old, right? Dean's seminal papers on cardiovascular disease not published. In 1993, before any of the luminaries involved in this enterprise had told us what they had to say, before, we already knew enough, based on what McGinnis and Figi told us, to prevent 80% of all chronic disease. We already knew enough. Now have the sense, maybe it's the triumph of hope over experience, but have the sense that I've persuaded some of you with that notion, right? So I think I can persuade Mark, too. I mean, it's the truth. So, yes, we can disagree about some stuff, it's fine. But before any of us did what we do, we already knew enough to prevent 80% of chronic disease. Let's use what we know. Let's tell people that. And then go back to bickering with the door closed. It's fine, right? And, yeah, nobody really needs to be in the marquee position. An organization may need to lead. For logistical reasons, we can work that out. But keep the faith, brother. I do want you guys in the fold. Eddie?
So, David, you know me. My name is Eddie Phillips. I work through Harvard Medical School. Since
did you get to the gym yet today?
I did, yes.
Got to fit it in later.
I had an open treadmill next to me for you, but I didn't see it.
I'll get there. I'll get there later.
There's a run from 5:30. There's a run from 5:30 to 6:30 this afternoon. So, since 2007, I founded and direct the Institute of Lifestyle Medicine, and I wanted to publicly here and now, in support, bring up our own sandbags. We've been working to integrate lifestyle medicine into medical education at all levels, to get it out to nurses, et cetera. And when I saw your schematic, and there's a place for medical education, it's a necessary, not sufficient step, but I wanted to sort of publicly bring that forward and lay down my sandbag here. And to open this up to people in the audience to come up to me, and I've got the anchor talk of this whole conference, about what you're doing in your medical schools or in your community to get this out, because we're not teaching this in medical school. Right. It's just...
Yeah. No, and Eddie, I don't know anybody who's doing more to fix that than you are. So
that's what we're bringing forward. So we're debating now how you teach and what you teach. And the word that we came up with is we teach generic exercise. We teach generic healthy nutrition. And then we can bicker. We could bicker in the back room.
Use what we know. Yeah. Again, I mean that notion of watching buildings burn down while debating the best way to put them out. We cannot tolerate that.
So, and then the other thing I wanted to share is, as I listened to what you were saying, that if anyone else had given this talk that didn't have the operational experience that you have to make this stuff happen, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. But I'm heartfelt that we're really on the right track now. So,
thank you.
Wanted to share that.
Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Noel Boyland. I'm a non-clinician, and I consult with companies and organizations.
Did you get lost?
What's that?
Are you in the wrong hotel?
Yeah. Where are the marshmallows? Yeah. Oh, wrong spot. And I help organizations, companies improve their culture so they're more supportive of healthy lifestyles. And so here I am schlepping my sandbag up here. And it's one of the things I thought was missing in that kind of true coalition was business leaders. The three, I think...
I called it industry, and then and the other thing about, actually there are two places. So businesses, they're directly involved in this space. There's a big role for them. But then others really are often, they are a microculture, right? It may be the place you want to change the culture, and they invite you in. Or they may be a payer because they're self-insured. Right. So I think they come in multiple places.
And those are the organizations I consult with. And there are business leaders, and there are more of these business leaders, especially in the younger generation, that are highly focused on helping employees have a life of meaning and life of purpose. And
come to my party.
What I do wrong? Ooh, party invitation. Okay, I'm cool. I work with a organization called Conscious Capitalism, which many of you might be familiar with, the book written by John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, and Raj Sisodia, a business professor. And there are many organizations, and it's growing faster and faster, where they do truly care about their employees, and part of that is creating cultures where there are healthier lifestyles.
Absolutely.
So I'd love I know Blue Zones is a bit more focused on community, but as I look at it, there's community, there's your household, and then there's where most people spend most of their waking hours, which is their workplace.
I agree.
And those are, wonderful opportunities to pull levers.
Come to my party. I totally agree. And again, I think there are multiple entry points. And what I showed this morning, there are a lot of operational details to be worked out. And most of this has been the product of a few select conversations. I think if you want to build an inclusive enterprise, the construction process needs to be inclusive. So one of the things I need to do as this, if there's a there, and I hope there is to start to get more input about how to put it together. Totally agree. A business can be a culture. A large employer is a microcosm. The one thing that's intrigued me about that, I've spoken a couple times at Michael O'Donnell's conference, the Art and Science of Health Promotion. By the way, I think they have room in our tent. They do great work. If you're not familiar with that conference, excellent conference. And I'll be speaking there this year. I think I'm giving the opening keynote, and Dan Buettner's giving the closing keynote at their conference. So he brings in, it should be great. But one of the things that I noticed at their conference, they have all these experts in worksite wellness, people who do the kind of work you do, great work. And they talked about the models, and you're right. I mean, this is where people spend a lot of their time. But then they do go home. And what most of the models didn't seem to address is, what about kids living at home? One of our projects, and again, I didn't devote today's talk to the sandbags that we built or are working on, but one we're working on, in particular with Ron Getzel. Do you know Ron? Mm-hmm. So Ron is a leader in the worksite wellness space, so he's collaborating with us on a project called BAWSS, B-A-W-S-S, Businesses Applying Wellness Strategies in Schools. And the idea that public schools are resource-strapped, they can't do state-of-the-art wellness programming. Businesses are doing it not just because they're good guys, but because they've got skin in the game and they get an ROI if they do it right. Well, what about businesses adopting public schools the way they adopt stretches of roadway? And instead of just saying this 3-mile stretch of interstate is brought to you litter-free courtesy of, say this public school district has state-of-the-art wellness programming courtesy of, and make sure that the message there is compatible with the worksite wellness message. So when mom or dad goes home from the worksite, they come home to kids who got the same religion at school, and they reinforce it, because a family is probably the single most important building block of any culture, right? So if the family rallies around the same health messages and they reinforce one another, everybody wins. Otherwise, I've long worried, and I've talked to Ron about this most extensively, what happens at the worksite could stay at the worksite. You go home, you learn good stuff, but your kids want, cheese doodles. Right. And so there are cheese doodles in your pantry, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up in a cold sweat and eating a cheese doodle. Yeah, exactly, right. So,
You're looking at me? It's obvious?
I couldn't help but notice the glow-in-the-dark orange crumbs.
It's my lip balm.
Somebody give the man a hanky. Let's follow up. Thank you. Thank you.
What's the name of that conference?
The Art and Science of Health Promotion.
So I think we have time for one more question, Dr. Katz.
You're the boss.
That was very nice.
Thank you.
Mark,
Yeah,
or
it was
David,
very
whoever
nice.
you are.
Thank you.
You're the boss.
Hi, my name is Jenny Stoffel. I'm the president of the American Occupational Therapy Association, and I'm here because my colleagues in occupational therapy asked me to be here to really look at forging relationships with all of the people who are here.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for your inspirational kind of message to really think about how it is that we can all work together to really create the change that we hope for. As I listen to your 3 F's and 3 S's, I'm wondering if an M might not enter that space. And I think my colleague just in front of me said meaning and purpose. In my profession, what we find is that when we ask people, instead of what's the matter with you, rather asking what matters to you, that actually creates the kind of process that moves people towards making everyday life choices about what they do with their time. So I wanted to offer that as a comment, but my question has more to do with some of the conditions associated with the loss of meaning or the lack of meaning in people's lives. And suicide would be the focus of that concern. Many of the other conditions that affect people across time, you've talked a lot about 80% reductions.
Right.
And suicide, unfortunately, is one of those health conditions that is on the rise as opposed to something we've been able to address. So I just wondered if you could talk about some of the science and evidence that you are aware of that might help us all really look at suicide and being able to intervene. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So actually, it's 3 F's, 2 S's, and an L. And I think the L is all about meaning. So it's feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. Now, whether that's love of life, love of self, love of purpose, love of someone, a lot of purpose right there. I totally agree with you. And I don't think anyone's ever said it better than Elie Wiesel. The person who has a why can tolerate any what. And who would know better than someone who went through the Holocaust, right? So the critical importance of why. We all need that. But I don't know if you're capable of true love if there is no why. I mean, if you've got true love, it's hard to overlook that as a reason right there. And if you are reasonless and purposeless, you're probably not capable of receiving or giving love. So I hope I didn't ignore that. In terms of suicide, obviously a huge issue. And again, there's a limit to how granular you can be in a talk that's delivered at this level. So, I didn't get into the details of effective counseling, or there are a lot of things I didn't say. And there are a lot of conditions that are very important. And there are conditions, frankly, we don't know how to prevent. So again, there's the 20% of bad stuff that's going to happen anyway. Do we think that lifestyle medicine will prevent amyotrophic lateral sclerosis? Would that it were so. I don't think we know how to do that yet. But in terms of suicide, those strong social bonds that the blue zones enjoy are associated with less depression, less mental health issues. So I didn't say heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia, depression, but it belongs on the list, other mental health ailments. They have a much lower rate of that as well, and it's partly strong social connections. Also, frankly, being chronically ill is depressing. In addition to it just being depressing because you don't feel well and you can't do the things you love to do, many of the pathophysiologic processes of chronic disease inveigh against mental health. They produce endocrinopathy. So, basically hormonal imbalances are associated with imbalances in neurotransmitters. So you have biochemical perturbations. Back to the issue about functional medicine, are we in the same tent? Hell yeah, we're in the same tent. The idea, so he tuned out. Functional medicine, it's a plug for functional medicine. Chronic illness, endocrinopathy, hormone imbalance, sabotage of sort of native biochemistry of the brain, neurotransmitter perturbations, depression, dysthymia, increased risk of suicide. So there's the biochemical contribution of chronic illness. There's the key cultural contribution of whether or not you're part of that key network. I think, frankly, one of the time-honored bits of wisdom we've forgotten about in our efforts to promote health comes courtesy of John Donne. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. So never send to know for whom the bell tolls for thee. In our culture, the alarm bells are tolling all the time. We tune them out. So I do think there is defense against suicide in the right approach. I didn't mean to leave it out. I'll add depression to my list from now on. Thank you very much.